The Illfurth possession, 5 years in the grip of demons, 2 young brothers in 1864 France, became vessels for entities that spoke dead languages and defied every law of nature. Illfurth sits quiet among the rolling farmland of Alsace, a region that has changed hands between France and Germany so many times that its identity remains caught between both. In 1864, this small village becomes the site of something that will consume 2 families, dozens of clergy, and 5 years of sustained spiritual warfare. The Berner household is ordinary, a Catholic family with 2 young sons living unremarkable lives in a deeply religious community. Then, without warning or explanation, 8-year-old Thichbout Berner collapses. The collapse is not illness in any conventional sense. Thichbout falls unconscious, but when he wakes, he is not himself. The voice that emerges from his mouth is not the voice of a child. It is deep, mocking, and speaks with contempt for his parents, for the neighbors who gather, for the cross that hangs on the wall. Thichbout has no memory of what he says or does during these episodes. When he returns to himself, he is terrified and confused, asking what happened, why everyone is staring at him with such horror. Within days, his younger brother Joseph, only 6 years old, begins exhibiting the same symptoms. The episodes come without pattern or warning. One moment the boys are playing, eating, going about their days. The next, they are gone, replaced by something that wears their faces but is utterly foreign. The parents turn to the only authority they know. They summon Father Karl Bray, the village cure. Father Bray arrives expecting to find illness, perhaps psychological distress, something within the realm of pastoral care he has provided for years. What he encounters in the Berner home shakes him profoundly. Both boys are in the grip of an episode when he enters. They are speaking in perfect Latin, a language they have never been taught. The family speaks German. The boys have no formal education beyond basic literacy. Yet here they are, conversing fluently in the language of the church, using complex theological arguments to mock the priest standing before them. Father Bray produces a crucifix. The reaction is immediate and violent. Both boys shriek and recoil as though burned. They hurl themselves away from the object with such force that they collide with furniture. Their eyes remain fixed on the cross with an expression of pure hatred. When Father Bray begins to pray, the voices that emerge from the children become guttural, furious, promising that he will fail, that they will not leave, that these vessels belong to them now. The priest recognizes what he is facing. This is not illness. This is not the work of troubled minds. This is possession, genuine, severe, and involving 2 children simultaneously. He contacts the Archdiocese of Strasbourg immediately. The church responds with the seriousness the case demands. Multiple exorcists arrive in Illfurth. They bring with them the Roman ritual, the formal procedures developed over centuries for confronting demonic possession. They interview the family, examine the boys, document every detail. Physicians are consulted. The doctors find nothing, no disease, no injury, no physical explanation for what witnesses describe. The boys are healthy by every medical measure available in 1864. Yet the manifestations continue and intensify. During episodes, Thichbout and Joseph float. Not metaphorically, not in the fevered imagination of frightened observers, but physically rise from the ground. Witnesses include clergy, family members, neighbors, multiple people observing the same impossible event. The boys levitate horizontally, their bodies rigid, suspended in midair with nothing supporting them. When the priests attempt to pull them down, the children are immovable, as though fixed in place by invisible force. The voices multiply. Latin gives way to French, a language as foreign to these German-speaking Alsatian children as Latin. The French is perfect, fluent, sophisticated. Then come languages no one present can identify. Linguistic scholars, who later review the documented accounts, suggest possible ancient dialects, but nothing can be confirmed. The entities speaking through the Berner brothers demonstrate knowledge they could not possibly possess. They reveal private sins of people in the room. They describe events from the past that the boys were not alive to witness. They predict, with disturbing accuracy, when the exorcism sessions will end and when they will be forced to resume. The physical transformations are profound. During manifestations, the boys display strength impossible for their age and size. It requires multiple grown men to restrain Thichbout during violent episodes. Joseph, tiny at 6 years old, throws adults across the room. Their faces contort into expressions that witnesses describe as inhuman, features twisted into configurations that seem anatomically wrong. Their bodies bend and flex in ways that should cause injury but leave no marks. Holy water produces reactions as extreme as the crucifix. When blessed water touches their skin, the boys scream as though scalded. Blisters sometimes appear at the point of contact. Rosaries cause similar distress. The mere proximity of consecrated objects triggers violent attempts to flee. During one documented session, a priest approaches with a relic of a saint concealed in his pocket. Before he can reveal it, both boys begin shrieking and demanding he remove that thing from the room. They should have no way of knowing what he carries. The exorcism sessions follow the prescribed ritual. The priests invoke the authority of the church, command the entities to identify themselves, demand they depart. The responses are contemptuous. The voices claim ownership of the boys. They mock the efforts of the exorcists. They make threats. They describe in detail the torments they are inflicting on the children. Between episodes, Thichbout and Joseph remember nothing. They wake confused, exhausted, injured by their own actions during possession, but with no understanding of what happened. The community fractures under the weight of what is happening. Illfurth is small, tightly knit, and deeply Catholic. The presence of possession in their midst terrifies people. Neighbors who once brought meals and shared tools now avoid the burner house entirely. Other parents forbid their children from playing with Thichbout and Joseph. The family becomes isolated, marked by something no one wants to approach too closely. The only consistent presence becomes the rotating shifts of clergy who arrive to continue the work of exorcism. 5 years pass this way. 5 years of repeated sessions, of temporary improvements followed by violent relapses, of hope crushed and rebuilt and crushed again. The priests document everything, the manifestations, the responses to ritual, the patterns they observe. The case begins appearing in Catholic periodicals. Theologians and demonologists across Europe follow the progress of the Illfurth possession. It becomes a reference case, studied for its duration, its severity, and its meticulous documentation. In 1869, the breakthrough comes. Thichbout, now 13, undergoes what the clergy recognize as the final confrontation. The exorcism session is brutal. The entity inhabiting him makes one last violent effort to maintain its hold. Witnesses describe Thichbout levitating higher than ever before, his body rigid and trembling, the voice emerging from him promising destruction. The exorcist continues the ritual without pause. He invokes Christ, the saints, the full authority of the church. He commands departure in terms that permit no negotiation. The moment of release is unmistakable. Thichbout drops to the ground. The tension leaves his body. His eyes open, his own eyes, clear and aware. He looks around the room and asks what day it is. The entity is gone. In the days and weeks that follow, there is no relapse. Thichbout remains himself. The nightmare that consumed 5 years of his childhood ends. Joseph's exorcism follows the same pattern. The final session is intense, the entity resistant, but the outcome is the same. The younger brother is freed. Both boys recover completely. They grow into adolescence and adulthood without any recurrence of the manifestations that once defined their lives. They marry, they have children. By all accounts available, they live ordinary, peaceful lives, the possession a terrible chapter that closed and never reopened. The Illfurth case occupies a specific place in Catholic demonological literature. Its 5-year duration makes it one of the longest documented possession cases involving children. The involvement of multiple exorcists over an extended period provides unusual depth of observation. The contemporary documentation, detailed accounts written by the clergy directly involved, gives it credibility that many possession cases lack. Researchers studying the phenomenon return to Illfurth repeatedly as a reference point. Questions remain that the case cannot answer. Why these two brothers? Why did the possession begin when it did, with no apparent precipitating event? What made them vulnerable to something that most people, even in that deeply religious time and place, never encountered? The Church has frameworks for understanding possession, but those frameworks do not always explain the mechanism of initial contact. Two ordinary boys in an ordinary family in an ordinary village became vessels for entities that defied nature and reason. Then, after 5 years of sustained intervention, they were freed and returned to ordinary life. The vulnerability of children surfaces repeatedly in possession literature. Thibaut and Joseph had no agency in what happened to them. They could not consent to or refuse the entities that took control. They could not advocate for themselves or seek help independently. They were entirely dependent on the adults around them, their parents, the priests, the church, to recognize what was happening and respond appropriately. The 5-year duration suggests how difficult that response can be, even when taken seriously and pursued with every resource available. Illfurth remains quiet. The Burner family house, if it still stands, bears no marker of what occurred there. The church where Father Bray served continues its ordinary functions. The possession that consumed the village for 5 years has faded into history, remembered primarily in theological texts and case studies. But the documentation remains. The accounts written by the priests who worked with Thibaut and Joseph preserve in careful detail what they witnessed, children in the grip of something inhuman, and the long, difficult work of setting them free. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.